A game I got really into recently is Dragon Age Origins. I'd seen the box a billion times at work, but never thought about it because I was expecting Lord of the Rings 4, the Dragon Edition. That is until a coworker of mine said, "Take it out, it's really good. It's by Bioware, those guys who made Mass Effect. There's really nothing like it." So I brought the game home, got into my pajamas, bundled up, and started playing it on my monster Brickface 360 with no expectations. First of all, to get it out of the way, the story isn't too remarkable. You're a human/elf/dwarf who, in one of the 6 opening storylines, is made a Grey Warden, a legendary warrior who fights demons called Darkspawn in order to combat a terrible foe called the Archdemon, which only shows up once during a blight. No lie, I could literally predict every twist that came up in the storyline. Loghain? Evil? That's not possible. And Alistair, royalty? You're joking. And I'm sure the senior Grey Warden will be able to kill the Archdemon. Sure, he won't die. Honestly, the story's nothing fresh or original. That is until you factor in the gazillions of choices that can be made to drastically alter the storyline. See, if it weren't for the choices, I might have a hard time playing a game like this, but Dragon Age is one that is full of option as well as consequence. And when I say consequences, I mean consequences. Not someone saying, "I noticed that you have long ears because you chose the elf class." I mean, like, not knowing that you'll be unable to continue a relationship with a character at the end of the game because in the beginning you didn't choose to be a human noble, or another character ditching your party to fight against you because you didn't give him enough relationship points. I also realize that in almost every quest, you'll encounter one of 2 types of moral predicaments. Sometimes you'll come across an enemy who'll try to persuade you into sympathizing with them in return for a pretty sweet reward that will make another character hate you if you accept. But they won't give you much of anything if you say, "Screw it," and kill him instead. But your goody two-shoes party members will admire your moral strength. For the big major quests like recruiting elves, mages, and dwarves, you'll have to pick between 2 conflicting parties in terms of who you want to side with. Usually the game makes it pretty clear who's right and who's wrong, so it isn't usually that hard to choose, but since every action really does have a consequence, you could end up screwing yourself over if you're wrong. Circle of Magi is a good example. I'll try not to spoil, but let's say you did the whole damn level, including the Sloth Demon, and decide to sympathize with Cullen and the Templars instead of the mages. Well, that very well might mean that you completely screwed yourself over in Redcliffe. How do you get over this? Load your last save and choose the mages instead, you dumbass. It's better than the alternative, which was for me losing like 30 points of approval from Alistair. The moral choices you make usually don't have too much impact on the world around you, but they certainly do affect your party. The other characters in the game are unique because while most games have the linearity to throw characters into your party in order to accommodate the story, Dragon Age really only has 2 linear characters, Alistair and Morrigan, and the dog if you started off as a human noble. Everyone else is optional. I didn't pick Liliana up on my first few playthroughs because I just never came across her. You need to go out of your way to get Sten. Zevran can be killed when you first meet him, and Shale is only in the DLC. When can be fought and killed during her storyline. And I don't even know about Oghren because he kind of just showed up in my party during Orzammar, but like everyone else, he has the "I want you to leave" dialogue option, which I never tried, but I assume boots him. They all operate on an approval system, which is way too easy to miss in the party menu. The system itself is pretty simple. It adds or subtracts points based on your choices and dialogue. Cold-hearted characters like Alistair or Wynne admire a warden who does the right thing, which isn't always clear, believe me, while people like Zevran and Morrigan admire those who aren't strangers to some ass-kicking. I wasn't too bothered by that, though, because I thought that it made them seem more like real people and less like creepy linear reading robots. The warden is a custom character whose entire body, face, are up to you to customize. Playing on the 360, I had about 11 ugly hairstyles to pick from, but you PC users will be able to have a ton more. I went through a lot of trouble to make a pretty Grey Warden mage, only to cover her up with heavy armor and helmets to keep her from being killed by every enemy that targets mages. Luckily, I found out that in camp and dialogue menus, masks and headdresses come off, so tiny customizing feats were not in vain after all. Being a mage, I've realized that there are quite a few more options in the story opened up to you. You get free stuff from the Desire Demon and the Fade, you get this tense, guilty relationship with Templars, and from what I've seen, your prologue chapter is the longest. My first spell learned was Virulent Walking Bomb, which infects any opponent with draining health over the entire continuation of the fight until they explode. Good choice! That kept me winning for the rest of the game, let me tell you. And then it can be upgraded so that when it explodes, other enemies are infected, yay! Thinking about it now, why are there so many of each class in your party? You have 4 warriors, including your dog, 2 rogues, and 2 mages, 3 in my game. And I was an arcane warrior/blood mage. If specialties were awarded only once, maybe this whole system would make sense, but since most characters get at least 2 in a normal playthrough, you can essentially teach everyone anything you want. I guess it's to make use of all the minor specialties, but they level up regardless, so you don't even have to use the doubles in your party. Another interesting mechanic, mages use spells, and spells have cooldown times before they can be reused. That makes sense, I can't spam Crushing Prison that way. When you die, you jump into the mind of another character instead of getting a game over for having the protagonist die like in Mass Effect. But having been a mage, I didn't know anything about direct attacking as a melee character. So as Zevran, I pressed A continually and then used some of my attack spells, which one of them was like a kick to the groin. But why does a kick need to regenerate? I didn't use all my energy doing that. Even my dog needs to rest for a minute after biting someone. Why? But it's funny that even though the game was chock full of very unshocking, suspenseful bits and tons of horde fights, I would play for hours and hours and hours. I spent a whole weekend playing with one character start near to finish. Honestly, I'd say that the quirks are more than made up for by the A-grade choice consequence engine, and for me, the characters and dialogue. I'm not sure how many other people agree with me with this. I was one of those people that played Mass Effect and would get frustrated that I couldn't have more than like a 5-minute chat with each of my characters between missions. It felt very much like, okay, ship, I've got 5 minutes to talk, but that's it, so let's make this quick. Dragon Age more than scratched that itch with its multi-encyclopedia-length dialogue trees to the point that I would sometimes even opt out of hearing about Mr. Grumblebum's family history, or just cut a deal before my enemy had the chance to persuade me with a necklace of dead kittens that looked particularly good on blood mages. But then again, I was also one of the few people who was excited for Mass Effect 2 because you get to bang Garrus. Yay, romance! By the way, I've heard a lot of people say that Zevran's romance scene is longer than Alistair's and also way more steamy, but no matter how many times I play with the intention of boning someone else, I always end up with Alistair anyway. In conclusion, I love this game. I do, really. Despite the unoriginal parts, it looks beautiful. I've never seen it load on itself, though it sometimes gets buggy. The character dialogue is really well acted, and I've always loved the map-traveling banter that randomly pops up between characters. DLC is pretty swanky, like going back to Ostagar and getting feast day presents. The radial menu took a little getting used to, but it was nice and functional. I'm not really a fantasy RPG fan, but this game kind of surprised me. And I would say that if you liked any of the things I just mentioned, it would be worth your time. Depending on how you play, it can feel big or small. Do all the mercenary missions if you want to, or just recruit your allies directly. Do someone, do everyone, it's up to you. Everything is your choice. It's not a right-trigger shooter or a hack and slash, but it is an involving experience and a weekend without eating or showering.